There was a guy who came over to me and said something just last week after we were talking here. And he said that there's a Yemenite guy around here. And you know what's good about about having a Yemenite in the base medrash? There's someone else who's holding about Hebrew pronunciation and diktuk. There's someone you can talk to, and he even taught me a few things. He showed me, you see in this book, this is the rule. Why is it something's mil el and something's mil ra? Do you know there's a rule here? Shuva or shuva, lama or lama. Sometimes it's mil el and sometimes it's mil ra. You know that? Yeah.
Last month.
Yeah. Oh, you found the rule? You know the rule? I never knew the rule. Well, at least he said it. Now I have to check the rule, but he
The next word it begins with ends with or something.
No, not like that. No, it's more complicated, and it's related to that thing I wrote about in the Soga Chor and the Atemer Rechik. It's mil el if the next word can get a dagesh of the Atemer Rechik, and if it can't, then it's mil ra. Okay, there you go. If you know the rule of Atemer Rechik, which might be beyond the scope of what we're talking about right now, I'd have to get out my papers. This is something I was discussing, ironically, also. A few Hanukkahs ago, they put this in that Dikduk people's website. They have a kenis. It was online during China virus time. It was on Hanukkah. So everybody talks about a Dikduk issue. So first up was Rav Tzuriel. He was talking about Dagesh Chazak. It's also Chashuv. How, you have certain words people know, Malay and Malay, and, the difference between those two words. They gave a lot of examples why it is you have to correct them, things like that. And then he allowed me to speak, and I was talking about this whole Atemer Rechik, and is it a Dagesh Chazak or Dagesh Kal? Why does it appear? What's its function? The different opinions, or it's something else entirely. And I didn't, if I had put these two things together, I would have maybe come up with this rule and said that, when you have a word like shuva or shuva, depends if Atemer Rechik can be held up. Basically, that's what they're going for. Okay, so this thing I learned from the local Yemenite guy. So it's good he's around. And then we were discussing pronunciation, of course, our favorite vowel, which is the halam, which in Ashkenazic circles, especially here in Israel, because everybody has to be Polish, the pronunciation is just an I, as I marked it in my book, UHY, like an American I. And it so happens that sound is sort of redundant because they pronounce a kamatz as an and kamatz with the yud is I, leading to the strange internal contradiction, tarta de sasre, that in Shem Adnut, the second vowel is cholam, and the third vowel is a kamatz followed by yud, such that if we just leave off the dalid, you get dainai. It rhymes. Da and nai rhyme, but it can't be. This is a cholam, and that's a kamatz yud. So obviously the cholam should not be the sound of kamatz yud. And by the way, not all Ashkenazim pronounce it that way. It was only in Hungary and Poland they were pronouncing it that way. In the West, it was o or ow. Farther east, it was like an a-like sound, except among Medaktikim who had the tradition of the gra to say it more like an o. And then, of course, there's the more Sephardic / Israeli one, which is an o. But that is presumably not exactly what they do. Either way, in the Western world, it became that you pronounce if you want to be nice and Haradite, you pronounce your cholam, even if you're Litvish or what from the Western world, you pronounce it like the Polish do, and like the Hasidim, which is a nice proper I. Okay, so we were discussing this and the contradictions and the proofs that it's obviously not. And then there was a fellow who was listening. He happens to be gone to Haredi Yeshiva. So afterwards, he told me he went to his Rosh Yeshiva and asked him about this. And the Rosh Yeshiva told him, yeah, but our Masoret is Ay, and that's the way it's supposed to be. So I told him, oh, okay, there you go. Shkoyach. That reminds me of when we were discussing the Beged Kefet letters back in Yeshiva. One proud Sephardic fellow who learned from the Babylonian tradition says, I asked Rav so-and-so, what's the correct pronunciation of a bet without a dot? And you know what he told me? Buh. Just like a bet. There's no difference. Like, shkoyach, to tell me that you don't have a distinction, but there should be. No, there never was a distinction. It's all B, like in Arabic. That doesn't help. Obviously, that's wrong. But then I realized that, when you ask halacha l'maisa a question, you have to know who you're asking. This fellow asked the Rosh Yeshiva, how should I be pronouncing this vowel? So it came out as an I, right? That's what he said. If you wanted to ask a sophisticated question in Shabbos, can I turn on the light switch on Shabbos? Someone just told you yes or no. Why? That's what we do. Can I freeze a can of chickpeas on Shabbos? Can you do that? Yes or no? Because I read in a book. That's what everybody knows. If you are a little bit more learned yourself or aspiring to be learned, and you want an actual answer, you go to someone who could actually tell you, well, first let's see the source in the Gemara. In the Gemara, Chazal are talking about no lot of issues and this and that, and they're talking about cooking, then they're using heat to derive a change. And if you harden something with heat, that would be a malacha, right? Even if it's just the cork of a bottle, like Chazal give. But they never talk about using cold to freeze things, right? And then you find it's very much lacking in the Torah. The Rambam doesn't talk about freezing things on Shabbos. Why? Did the Rambam ever live in a place where it even got below freezing? That you had a choice. You could actively take a cup of water and freeze it. Where Moshe Feinstein mentions freezing things. Why? Because he lived in a place where you open the window, or even if you don't, maybe just open the shutters. You stick a cup of water outside. A few minutes later, it's an ice cube, right? So it's only in later post-game that we have such a thing. So you want a sophisticated answer. You'll want if you want to be holding, you'll go to someone who can actually tell you the sources and give you a real answer and explain to you why it is. That's what happens when you ask a question, Lamaisa. But if, for example, you just ask a question and he says, well, generally speaking, the answer is, I don't know why it is. I can't give you all the sources. He's outsourcing his halacha. Okay? So if you need to know now, so yeah, you could give a major opinion and you learn. But if you want to check if someone's holding, Rishonim, Achronim, you should actually ask into it. So that's a bad sign if they can't do it. Now, normally, concern, let's say, kachim and taros. Okay? As a rabbi, do you get questions about kachim and taros? No, because there's no real nafkamina today, and no one studies these things. There isn't a rabbanut smicha on kachim and taros yet. Okay? What about nida? The only time you really have taros comes up with nida. That's the one you get the most, right? And then you have stuff about, I don't know, aspirin. Can I take some aspirin on Shabbos? And other things like that. Did you meet someone who's able to actually defend this argument? You might be holding your idea that you're talking about, but yeah, it's very difficult. So let's get back to the grammar part. Too often, statements are made about Hebrew grammar by people who are totally not holding. I do not believe that this fellow, he went to his Rosh Hashiva, beyond what he could say is, well, this is the way we do it, so that's it. It's an I. Does he know what the Vilna Gaon says about this? Does he know anything that the other side says? Is he familiar with any Medaktikim today or yesterday who have what to say? Does he know about the rule of Patach Gnuva after Cholam? Does he know why there's a Vav there? Does he know what an Aim Kriya is? You have to ask, is he holding? Can he give and take? By the way, ask someone. This is usually the giveaway. Is he holding in something? That means, can he talk about it? This was also a giveaway. I don't want to talk about politics, but I remember I was listening to some things. I cleaned the house before Shabbos. That's when I listened to, news, running in and around the bathroom. So you can't listen to stuff that's holy. And they asked Harris regarding her foreign policy and other things. And she had nothing to say. Like, I don't know, like, what's she going to do in, this economic things? People noted, aside from the fact that she would say funny things, people laugh at that. But when it came to actually give a substantial answer, she didn't say anything that means anything. Like, you'd say, like, she even knows what she's talking about. We don't even know if she was wrong in her opinion because she didn't actually express an opinion. But then some guy asked Trump, what are you going to do about the energy crisis and trying to improve the energy market and also how that works with foreign things? And he's rattling off information. He's like, oh, I wish, he spoke for 3 hours about it. I would, you never asked. So you know that even if he's wrong or he's planning to do something that might not be correct, at least you could tell he knows what he's talking about. So before you ask someone how to pronounce a kamatz and how to pronounce a cholam and why it is they sound awfully similar, a kamatz with a yud and just a cholam as it is sound awfully similar and maybe even exactly the same, and that's what you're taught. Why is that? Or maybe it should be something else. Does the fellow actually know anything about this? Yeah, so ask. Okay. Remember, one guy claimed he knew Tamei Mikra for Sifrei Emes. I was so excited. I told you about this. We had a meet and greet on Shabbos. He was like, yeah, I was just learning about Tamei Emes back then. It must have been 15 years ago, something like that. Came to Eretz Yisrael. I got the Das Mikra Tehillim as your introduction to Tamei Emes by Rev Breuer. It's not the definitive exposition of the thing. It's not without its disputants. but it's a very good introduction. Has a lot. It's a gold mine of information, and whatever. And everybody was passing away. Anybody could have asked about this, and finally found someone who claimed, yes, I know Tommy Emes of Sifrei, Tommy Emes for these farm. So I said, oh, good. So maybe you know why it is something that's bothering me. Like regular Sfarim, you have to have a certain amount of mafsikim before the siluk. Okay, you can actually count the syllables, and then you'll be required to add a mafsik. Whereas you could have how many mafsikim are there in that series until the end? The ito is accented. If you were in Sifrei regular, you'd have at least 2, possibly 3 mafsikim before the siluk. But in Tehillim, that's apart from that. That's right there in Ashrei. All of those are masharsim. You know what I'm talking about? The most people that your rabbi said, why is it? How is that possible? And he just looked like, we'll talk about that later. 15 years later, I'm still waiting. He was lying. Okay, the guy was just lying to make himself look good. But he wanted. Can you give and take? Do you even know what I was saying? The terms, Okay. Yeah, I know. About 2 guys. Women should look up to their husbands, right? A lot of times they do. Women, you should be someone that your wife looks up to. Why? Because you're supposed to be studying Torah, and she's supposed to go to you to be answer questions. And if it turns out you're an Amma Aretz, you're letting her down. Okay, I know 2 guys have been liberated. I thought they were under bad influence. Okay, because their rabbi knew enough to guide them, but not enough beyond this. He was just like, head of the dog type of thing. He wasn't there, so they were liberated from someone who wasn't holding. But I don't know if they're learned enough to realize that I'm thinking back to pulpit rabbis in America. There are some pulpit rabbis who are great scholars. They are there. I'm thinking about rabbis I knew in New York, Mechaber Sfarim Dayonim, really holding. And the Balabatim just cannot appreciate someone like that. So thank God he has learned people around. It's in New York, so it's not like he's intellectually isolated. And even in his own Kehillah, he has, there's a good core of men who appreciate that and actually realize, like, yes, he is tops. But I feel sorry, there's so many others who just don't get it. Okay? That's usually the case. And then there's some places you go and it's a young guy, I remember when I took a pulpit. Why did I do that? Because they offered me. They need someone to run the shul and lane and all that. What were you doing with the 24-year-old? Okay. Well, actually, no, I was 25-year-old, the baby. My main job was to bring guys like you and him and others to shul on Shabbos just so that there's a minyan. Okay. And give a sermon. So that I can understand, but some guys stay on the job like that forever and they still don't know anything. And people think that, he's a somebody, but it's really not. So you have to see who your rabbi is. He really holding her. And then sometimes you realize, he didn't know anything. He was just, he was outsourcing this. What? His phone number? Yeah. Moshe Feinstein told them at the Chag HaSmicha, here, take down the most important piece of information you have is my phone number for when you actually get shilas. Yeah. Rabbi Kwalwasser said, he's the Mashgiach at Levator, he said that so you graduate YU, it's a Smicha program, so you get Rav Schechter's number. Actually ask real questions. I used to see Rabbi Willig sitting next to his phone in the summer. He's on vacation. He's doesn't go back to New York for 2 months, but he's there, phone with his cordless phone. Back then, cordless phone was a fancy thing. Taking shilas all the time. Okay, like real shilas. Yeah, that's how you know. By the way, who's on top of the pyramid? The Sanhedrin. All these attempts to make a real Sanhedrin will only work when what? Well, a number of conditions. One of the conditions there is a Sanhedrin that's actually trying to do things right. You know why? They're doing their diunim, their gatherings on the Temple Mount. For legitimacy, that's what they're listening. I remember telling them that. And they're actually talking about, Rabbi Bar-Hayim originally criticized them because they're talking about, kashrus of tuna fish and, non-Klal Yisrael types of questions, like the big questions. But now they're actually dealing with the big questions. But they're missing the most fundamental aspect that hopefully whoever gains this, they will be the Sanhedrin officially. And that is, remember, the Moshe Rabbeinu rule, who's at the top of the pyramid. When your rabbi doesn't know something, who does he ask? And when he doesn't know, who does he ask? Basically, there's a few places pyramids grow like this. In Bnei Brak, it was pretty clear who was on top of the pyramid, like the real questions. Rav Chaim Kanievsky, for all his greatness, was not the one who was fielding real serious questions from other Rabbanim. It was Rav Rav Karelitz, Gav Bastin. Okay, and in Jerusalem, who was sitting at the top of the pyramid for a while? Rabbi Zalman Nehemiah Goldberg. Real questions were going to him, and everybody knew they could ask him. The second you get the people who are at the tops of the pyramids in the various places, in Jerusalem and Bnei Brak and major population centers, the second you have them and the people they consult, when if you have a good scholar, even though he might be capable of answering the question, another sign of his humility and his effectiveness is the fact that he convenes others to ask the question. Rav Herzog, for example, was given the dateline question from the Mir Yeshiva. Just goes to show you how much the Mir Yeshiva held of the chief rabbi back then, because Rav Herzog was the greatest rabbi of his generation at the time. He was Rav Kook's successor. Rav Herzog didn't just answer the question for them, decide that Shanghai is to the west of the dateline. So it gets Yom Kippur before Jerusalem instead of after. He actually convened a lot of rabbis, big shots, and they heard Rav Tukachinsky's opinion, and then they decided like that. Chazanish wasn't there; he was in Bnei Brak. But the point was, that was a real beginning of how it's supposed to work. So once the Sanhedrin has the real poskim who are sitting on top of the pyramid, then it will be the Sanhedrin. But for now, I don't think that they're the ones who are fielding that.